Hi, everyone. Today we are going to talk about ecological pyramids and then later talk about the interactions between animals and the relationships they have. So, looking at this page, it shows an ecological pyramid, which is a diagram that shows the relative amount of energy or organisms contained within each trophic level of a food chain or a food web. Looking at the bottom here, we have our first trophic level. That is where the producers, the ones that make their own food from photosynthesis, are at the very bottom. So this is our first trophic level. Our second trophic level consists of our herbivores, the ones that eat the producers. So that is the second trophic level. Third trophic level is our primary carnivores. And our fourth trophic level at the very top is going to be our secondary carnivores. So an energy pyramid shows a relative amount of energy available at each trophic level. Organisms in a trophic level use the available energy, so for their life processes, for growth, photosynthesis, cellular respiration, and they release some energy as heat. So remember that every chemical process that happens in your body releases heat as a byproduct because we're burning calories. So what happens within each trophic level, there's only a certain amount of energy that's transferred to the next level, and that's because most of it is being lost as heat. So in ecological terms, we refer to the rule of 10. Only 10% of the available energy within a trophic level is transferred to the next higher trophic level. So we're going to look at a biomass pyramid and then an energy pyramid. So a biomass pyramid represents the amount of living organic matter at each trophic level. And then here is the energy pyramid. So looking at the biomass pyramid, I like it how it shows the numbers because we just talked about the rule of 10. So the very bottom, we start off with 100% energy. So that's from the producers, from photosynthesis. Then only 10% is transferred to the next because most of it is being lost as heat. And then in the third trophic level, only 1% is available because the rest was lost as heat. So the fourth is only 0.1%. So looking at the energy pyramid, it's the same thing. We have the most amount of energy at the very bottom. Then only 10% of the energy is transferred to the next trophic level. 10% is transferred to the third trophic level, and then 10% is transferred to the fourth. So here it shows a combination of the energy and the biomass pyramid, where we look at the energy is 1,000 kilocalories at the very bottom, and then only 10% is transferred to the next trophic level because the rest is lost to heat. So there's only 100 kilocalories available at the second trophic level, 10 kilocalories available at the third, and then 1 kilocalorie available at the very last trophic level. So ecological interactions between organisms, we're going to talk about how they relate to each other. First thing we're going to talk about is competition. So competition is when two organisms of the same or different species attempt to use an ecological resource in the same place at the same time. So this could be food, water, shelter. They're competing for those resources. So an example is monkeys compete with each other and other animals for food. So let's say there's like 100 banana trees and there's these 3 monkeys. If there's 100 banana trees, do these 3 monkeys really have to compete a lot with each other to get bananas? No, they don't. So that means that there's not a lot of competition between those monkeys. But say there's only 1 banana tree and 3 monkeys, they're going to compete for those bananas. So you increase that competition between those monkeys. Here's an example where we have a red squirrel and then we have a gray squirrel on the right here. And it says that until Americans introduced gray squirrels into parts of England in the 20th century, red squirrels had been the only species in that country. The gray squirrels were larger, they bred faster, and they successfully competed for those resources. So eventually, these gray squirrels, they won, and the red squirrels, they disappeared. So they were not prevalent in the country anymore, and only the gray squirrels were there. So a niche is or an ecological niche involves both the place where an organism lives and the roles that an organism has in its habitat. So we're looking at the example at the bottom with the sunflower. So the ecological niche of a sunflower growing in the backyard, it includes absorbing light, water, nutrients for photosynthesis, but also it provides shelter for organisms like bees and ants, and it gives off oxygen in the atmosphere. So the ecological niche of an organism depends not only on where it lives, but also on what it does. So by analogy, it may be said that the habitat is the organism's address, and the niche is its profession, biologically speaking. So if we're looking at a worm, for example, a worm's niche, if we're thinking about the address, it lives in the soil, it lives in the ground. But what does it do for the ecosystem? It mixes up the soil, it mixes up the nutrients. So that could be its niche, its profession, mixing up the soil. Now, predation is one organism captures and feeds on another organism. Looking at a predator and prey relationship, we're going to look at and compare them in a moment. But a predator is one that does the killing. So if we look at the example here at the bottom, this snake is killing the frog because it's eating the frog. So the snake is the predator, while the frog is the prey. It's the one that is the food. So when we see graphs like this, you'll see one on the attendance check and a couple on your test. And what it shows is a predator-prey relationship. And this particular example, I'm sorry, there's not a picture. It won't show in the Chromebook for some reason. But we're looking at a lynx. A lynx is kind of like this cat type thing in the snow. It is the predator, while a snowshoe hare is the prey. It's kind of like a bunny rabbit. And if you notice, that as you increase the lynx, it seems like the snowshoe hare also starts to increase. So let's think about the lynx as the predator. So if the hares, they start increasing in population, so say they're just breeding and there's more and more of these bunnies, well, the lynx has less competition. So if it has less competition, that means that they're able to breed and make more lynxes in the process, so they also increase. But then there reaches a critical point where there's way too much competition going on. I mean, because they're eating up all the hares. So once that starts to decrease, then also the lynx population starts to decrease as well. I'm going to attach another YouTube video where somebody explains this predator-prey relationship and looking at the different perspectives. So please check that out to look at a different example. So the last thing we're going to talk about is something called a symbiosis, and that's any relationship in which two species live closely together. We're going to talk about mutualism, commensalism, and then parasitism. So the first one is mutualism. That's when both species benefit. So it's a win-win scenario. So if we're thinking about insects and flowers, insects, they get nectar from flowers, so they win in that process, while flowers get insects to take their pollen so they can produce more flowers somewhere else. So it kind of travels. So that is a win-win relationship. So it's mutualistic. Another relationship is called commensalism, where one member of the association benefits and the other is neither helped nor harmed in the process. So an example here is barnacles on a whale. So the whale is not being harmed by the barnacles at all. The barnacle has a location where it can settle, it gets nutrients from the whale, but it's not harming the whale. So it's kind of like a win for the barnacles, but the whale's like it's a zero. The whale doesn't care. It's not getting harmed. So that's commensalism. Here's another example of commensalism. We have a remora fish right here next to this shark. It attaches itself to a shark, so the shark helps it transport it like further distances. It doesn't have to do anything. The shark doesn't care that the more sharks attached there, so it gets a free ride in the process. So this is where The shark doesn't care, but the remora shark or the mora fish, it's a win. So it's a win for the remora fish, and then the shark is like a 0, just doesn't care. Then birds building their nests on trees. The tree doesn't care. It's like, and the bird gets shelter and it stays away from predators. The last one is parasitism. That's when one organism lives on or inside another organism, a host, and then harms it in the process. So examples of parasites are like fleas and ticks. We look at our dog example here. We have a flea or a tick. The tick is just going to suck the blood of the dog, and it harms the dog in the process. So here the tick wins, but the dog loses. So it's a win-lose relationship. Here's some other examples. We have the caterpillar here, and then we have wasps that are laying their eggs on top of the caterpillar. So here the wasps are getting a place to attach its eggs. So this is a win for the wasps, but it's hurting the caterpillar in the process. So it's a lose for the caterpillar. Also, mosquitoes sucking blood off of animals. It's like the mosquito's winning, but guess what? The animal is being hurt in the process, and it's causing itch and harm. Then we have leeches. Leeches here are the win, and then sucking blood, it's causing harm to this fish. So that is a lose. So parasitism is a win-lose situation. Other examples here, we have aphids on a leaf. Now, aphids like an insect that sucks the fluids out, the waters out of the leaf. So here it's harming the leaf. So the aphids are winning, but the leaf is losing. So it's a win-lose relationship. So it's a parasite or parasitism. Here we have a cattle and we have an egret. An egret is a type of bird that sits on a cattle's back. And it says it's a mutualistic relationship because an egret eats the ticks and the fleas off of the cattle. But the cattle, when it tramps on the grass, it shoots up crickets and other food sources for the egret. So it's helping out the egret get more food. So here the cow gets somebody to eat the fleas and ticks, and the egret gets more food. So it's a mutualistic relationship. Now, a monarch and a milkweed. So monarch butterfly uses the milkweed in order to lay its eggs, to develop. It's a commensalistic relationship because it doesn't do harm to the milkweed. But it's one of those things where some would argue it's commensalism. Some would argue that it's a mutualistic thing because the monarch butterfly could take its pollen. So it's one of those things, but we're going to say it's commensalism. So it's one where it's monarch wins and the milkweed just doesn't care. It's a win-0 situation. So our 3 types of relationships: mutualism, win-win, both organisms benefit. We have commensalism, where one benefits and one is not affected. So it's a win-0 situation, like the barnacles on a whale. And then we have our parasitism. So one is winning, yay, but one is losing. So it's like a tick. It's like it sucks the blood off of an animal, but the animal is losing in the process. So it's a win-lose situation.